All right, so this is actually the first episode of Beyond Smoke. I'm Stephen Ortiz, the owner of Summers Point Cigar Lounge, and honored to have Glynn Loope here at our first one. And we'll see where this takes us. I'll give you an opportunity just to give you an introduction of maybe like where you're at now, and then we'll go maybe to the past and see how you got there. How about that? So why don't you take it from here and just let everyone know who Glynn Loope is and what you do actually too.
I'm a political flunky who loves cigars.
That's perfect.
Well, right now I'm coming to you from what I call 250 square feet of freedom, which is code for my office in my basement where my wife's not allowed to move anything. It's like believe it or not, there's a system. Um, but I'm south of Washington D.C. I live in Virginia. Uh, just a little background with the cigar industry. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. Um, in 2006, um, for the first time in the history of Virginia, a legislator put in a smoking ban proposal,
Hmm.
and it never been done before. And there's this incredible locally owned steakhouse that welcomed cigars in their bar. And that steakhouse was physically adjoined to my local cigar shop, which just turned 112 years old this year.
Wow.
It's moved three times in Roanoke, Virginia, in that 112-year history, Milan Tobacconists.
Um,
And the idea that our legislature, and I've always been involved in government and politics my whole career. And at the time, I had my own consulting firm doing lobbying work for the Manufacturers Association, the Trucking Association, educational institutions, local governments, pretty diverse set. And the idea that our legislature was not going to allow me to enjoy a cigar in that place next to the shop that welcomed us, I said, "This is a crock. This is
yeah.
this this has got to die." And so we worked together through a coalition of cigar reps and retailers that had a network that I didn't have at the time to create what amounted to be the second state association in the country, the Cigar Association of Virginia. And we came together and we presented our case and were able to kill that proposal in 2006, 7, and 8.
Wow.
And then subsequently, to make another long part of the story short, we brought Rocky Patel into Virginia, and I didn't know Rocky from Stephen Ortiz at the time,
Yeah.
and to help wine and dine some members of the legislature on this smoking ban proposal. And I'm driving him to our local shop for the event after this reception, and he said, "We're creating this thing called Cigar Rights of America. Do you want to run it?"
Mm.
And I initially said, "No, why don't you just hire me as a consultant to get it off the ground?" Well, 12 years later, I retired as director of Cigar Rights of America.
Yeah.
And after a I don't know, 6-month hiatus or something, we started talking about with our friends at the Premium Cigar Association, PCA, about lobbying and advocacy for all the states, exclusively for PCA. And that was almost 4 years ago.
Right.
This will be with the 6, 7, and 8. I went to the trade show with our friends from Virginia just as a guest and getting to know the industry in 2006, 7, and 8. So this will be my 18th trade show
Wow.
in one form or another,
Wow.
which means, I'm getting old.
Yeah. So that means, yeah, I was just looking at, obviously I do my little research trying to, make sure I understand who I'm talking with. But I always knew Glynn Loope. I mean, like I was saying before we got on live here or got on the recording, was if you're in the cigar industry in pretty much any capacity, whether you're a manufacturer, looking through business in the States, if you're a retail owner, broker, you're going to come across Glynn Loope at some point, whether it's in conversation or directly. I actually first met you, I want to say 2016 was something going on in Washington, D.C. It was sort of like a gathering or protest, whatever you want to call it. Save the Leaf, I believe it was called.
That's right.
So that was my first exposure to sort of like what was happening in politics and who was involved, and sort of like the movers and shakers. I mean, I guess the people you saw there were the ones that were really serious about what's going on in our government, let's just say, and how they're trying to regulate. Because I think when you think about like even the federal government trying to regulate cigars, I think that started in 2014, I want to say.
It did.
Okay, so then kind of led into like, what's going on here. They're sort of regulating these things in a way that I don't think a lot of the manufacturers really agreed to how that was happening. And I also remember the financial impact, I think, on these manufacturers with the regulatory procedures they would have to go through. Is that right? That they were just going to...
You nailed the story. We can end right there. You just explained it.
Yeah.
No, I'll give you a quick anecdote. Our team was preparing to do the cigars for the National Rifle Association annual convention in Indianapolis on the morning that the deeming rule was announced by the FDA of their intent to regulate premium cigars. It was May of 2014. I woke up to this. The phone was going nuts and blowing up. Look what they're trying to do to us. And I've got copies of this scattered around this office. But it was basically 200 and some pages that tried to really equivocate premium handmade cigars to a carton of cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not being dramatic when I say that. That's exactly what they tried to do.
Right.
And the final rule came out a year later, like April of 2016, and the industry filed its lawsuit against the FDA in 2017. And excuse me. And I don't want to, we can go into the intricacies of the lawsuit, but now we've won 3 times in federal court. We now have an appeal that's pending. The arguments were given a few weeks ago, and we wait yet another decision. So I don't want to elaborate on that because it's in an active state of litigation. Right. But the moral of the story is it would have bankrupted most of this industry if those original regulations had taken effect. I'll give an example because he gave me permission at a presentation I gave a couple of years ago to share this number. But you think about how many SKUs our friend Rocky Patel has. Mm-hmm. How many SKUs? If the FDA's testing regulation requiring the testing of this product right here mm-hmm. in a fashion that's similar to the chemical analysis testing of a cigarette, which is the only test they have. There is no methodology for testing a cigar that's an all-natural product with no chemical additives or, alterations and the like. It would have cost his company alone about $65 million. So you take that's just one company with one collection of SKUs. Now, Rocky's got a lot of SKUs, but still, in the tier, you think Altadas in general, and then you think about all, everybody else that constitutes this wonderful industry. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so if there was one calculation by our legal counsel that the industry not being regulated in the fashion proposed has saved this industry approximately $1 billion in compliance costs.
Wow. That's just, I remember when this was happening, a lot of boutiques, I opened up originally a cigar lounge in Washington Township in 2015. So we were right at that sort of regulation sort of procedure that was going to happen. I know that, I made friends with like all the boutique cigar manufacturers, things like, Enrique Sanchez from 1501, James Brown at Black Label, even guys like, Room 101, Matt Booth, and
Oh
some of
yeah.
those smaller backed, kind of like these guys would have been basically wiped out. It's just
Oh,
not.
I'll give you an example of exactly sort of the breakdown, a hypothetical of the standard humidor in America. We were trying to get our message across to a United States senator from Oregon, and I was already on the West Coast. And so we had a meeting with the senator's staff in a cigar shop. It was Broadway Cigar in Portland, Oregon. And we summoned all of the as many of the retailers as we could get from around the state to meet there and meet the senator's staff. And we took the senator's staff into the humidor. It was a pretty sizable walk-in humidor, and I didn't say a word like "Welcome, how are you?" Everybody introduced. I went around the humidor and I went, "That company can't afford to be regulated. That company cannot be regulated. That company cannot afford to be regulated." And I was being serious because it's like the companies you just rattled off in the boutique side of the industry, and it equated. I said, "How many?" So we had like 10 retailers represented, 6 to 10 retailers represented in the humidor from around the state. And I said, how many of you could afford to stay in business if 50% of your humidor disappears because they can't afford these regulations? Of course, nobody could afford to be.
Yeah.
So you're not only attacking the manufacturer side of the equation, you're putting hundreds, if not thousands, of American small businesses out of business because not everybody can be regulated and not everybody can afford it. And not everybody, and it's just insane to think that a regulatory standard that really applies to a cigarette model should apply to premium handmade cigars.
Yeah. It
And
never, it really never made sense. Never made sense to anyone who knows about this product that it would be regulated in the same fashion. And when you talk about SKUs, you're not even talking about just one blend. You're talking about this and a different vitola, a different size. That's a separate SKU. Same product, same master blender made it, same stuff in terms of like what was in that blend, but it's going to be regulated separately because it's a different size.
Well, and you just nailed that as well, in that what we're talking about here is the thing that separates these blends apart is time.
Yeah.
Time. How much time did this tobacco sit? And you can't regulate time.
Yeah.
What that does to the composition, what that does to the aroma, what that does to the flavor profile, and how do you get into the agronomy side of the equation of this tobacco came from this field and this tobacco came from that field, and this variable to the exact same weed altered this tobacco just enough to give it a different flavor profile. Well, why should that be subjected to an entirely new regulatory regime when it could have come out of the same field, could have been aged in the same barn? We're dealing with barns, not laboratories.
Right. And the thing is, these products, they're going to get to the retail store. I mean, there's going to be a cost that passes down to the consumer. So we're talking on about manufacturers, retail stores. Now you're talking about consumers. They would never be able to afford these because they had to pass down the cost to the consumer now.
Our own United States Small Business Administration has what's called the Office of Advocacy, and their job is to take an objective view of all regulations across the board, no matter what the industry is. And they were presented the package of the original regulations as well. And their letter, which I've got a copy of, this from right when the regulatory process began, the United States Small Business Administration said if they regulate, and this is almost a verbatim quote, if they regulate in the fashion that they have proposed, it would decimate 50% of this industry. And that's a federal agency talking to another federal agency.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
we'll wait and see how it plays out. There's contingencies.
And this is still going, is this still sort of,
We're awaiting the next judge's decision, and
okay. So it's still going to be a fight, and it
we'll see how
probably
it
will
plays
continue to
out.
be.
It's millions of dollars in industry legal fees
Yeah,
that we all have to partner with our brethren associations on. Um, but we'll see how it plays out. And the bottom line is never surrender.
that's right. Now, what's the, if you could speak to, because we still see CRA, we still see PCA, is there a different mission for each of these organizations? Are they sort of
Well,
together in some way, or?
we all carve out our respective niche. I mean, Premium Cigar Association is principally all the retailers, small business retailers in the country, but we obviously have the manufacturer members that participate in our annual industry trade show. Cigar Rights of America is both consumers and manufacturers, and the CAA, the Cigar Association of America, is a lot more of the larger players. Also delve into mass market products, but they have a collection of premium manufacturers that are members of theirs as well. So, in my opinion, there's not enough of us. There's a coalition. I think there's a political virtue in having a coalition of organizations. When heart, lung, and cancer team up against anything in the tobacco universe, they always present these letterheads that have like the logos of 45, 65 organizations that agree with them. And it makes a visual impact when they put up on a screen or a letter, these are the organizations that support our positions, and it just goes row after row after row after row. There's a lot of virtue in having the major three organizations that we have helping to defend this industry at the local, state, and federal level. Plus, we have under PCA, we have our state associations, which New Jersey's got an active state association as well, in about right now 28 states.
Okay.
And so we're developing a similar coalition to defend and protect our interests at all levels as well.
Wow. So let's back up a little bit, or let's dive into, because now we went through the bigger picture of the federal agencies trying to regulate the cigars. Your main focus is obviously the state advocacy level.
Mhm.
Although I think, like, you probably trickle down into all different areas of regulation and litigation. Tell us a little bit more about, like, because I know in New Jersey and a few other states that, we have our state government sort of tapping into regulatory practices like tobacco product tax. They're going to tax us at 30% here in Jersey. I think in New York, it's even worse than that. There's probably other states that are worse than New York. But how do you manage your time and your efforts? Because I think, I know that maybe the state, local advocacy groups are probably the way you do it. But talk a little bit more about, like, how your day runs. I can't imagine keeping up with everything that's happening in every state.
Well, it has its moments, and it's like right now we're in prep time for what happens in January. In January, 45 state legislatures will go into session simultaneously.
Okay.
In the last 12 months, I can say this off the top of my head because I've given 2 presentations since July about this subject. One at the Rocky Mountain Cigar Festival, and our friends at Smoker Friendly out there have a annual legislative conference for their retailers, and I went out and spoke to that. And then our PCA board just met in Washington in the last week and a half. In the last 12 months, there's been 499 pieces of tobacco legislation in the country. Every state had at least one.
Yeah. Wow.
Over 400 of those bills died.
Wow.
And a few of them were good, and then there's about 10 left in limbo. Well, we're about to start that process all over again. We have a legislative tracking system. And for bills of true significance, whether pro or con, they're posted on our website, which is cigaraction.org.
Mm.
Cigaraction.org. And you and your consumers, your patrons of your shops can go and register, put in their name, address, and zip code, and they will then subsequently be notified of any bill, good,
Mm.
bad, or indifferent, that affects their given state. And
Mm.
we'll have pre-drafted messages that will go to your members of the state legislature if we're supporting a bill or opposing a bill.
Mm.
So what I love about this job is that no hour, no day is the same.
Mm.
And literally this afternoon, I'll have a conference call with our friends at the Cigar Association of America, really doing a state by state breakdown of where the major issues are as of today. And one of those is hopefully discussing a tax cap bill for the state of New Jersey.
Mm.
And we're going to hopefully keep that on the drawing board, and we can go into some of the other things that are New Jersey specific. But you've got a national audience with this, so who knows
Yeah.
who will be listening. But I'll be talking about a Minnesota regulatory bill in the morning, a New York tax bill in the afternoon, a Connecticut cigar bar bill in late afternoon, uh, forming a state association in California a little bit later. It's, I literally, you can't tell this, but on the board in front of my desk right here, I keep a national map broken down by region. And if I stare at it, day in and day out, I go, all right, today I got to think about Georgia and Jersey and New York and a flavor ban bill in Maine. And then we got this tax piece of ceiling legislation in Colorado. And I kind of mentally go through the country, go, all right, I got to pay some attention to Michigan this week because this bill's, and I literally stare at it. It kind of triggers the mental process of what needs attention, what doesn't, who's on the coast. And when I say coast, meaning not having to really worry about them, there's a collection of states that are always the problem children.
So how
There's
do you have a
year
sense of, I'm sorry.
What's
No, go ahead.
No, what was that you were saying?
I was wondering, since who have you found to be the most, I would say, cigar friendly states? I mean, you would think something like PA, Connecticut, they're growing all those nice tobacco leaves out there. Virginia, maybe even. Are those like maybe friendly states of the cigar industry, or it really doesn't matter?
Well, that's a good question because even states that are traditionally tobacco friendly have bad pieces of legislation.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. I mean, and I say tobacco friendly, I mean, that might grow cigarette tobacco versus a Pennsylvania and a Connecticut that grow cigar grade tobacco. But, you know, last year, it's just the fact that a bill exists that you have to
Mhm.
work. These we can talk about them, but I think one of the greatest threats confronting this industry is this proliferation of what are called generational smoking bans, meaning you were born after January X date of 2007. And if you were born after January of 2007, you can never, ever, ever, ever purchase a tobacco product.
Mm.
So you could have been born after January 2007, turned 45 years old, want to go into your shop and buy a cigar for the golf course, and it would not be legal for you to do so.
Wow.
And these proposals are spreading like wildfire in Massachusetts.
Jesus.
And they've targeted 50 localities for that type of an ordinance. And it was originally proposed in New Zealand. They reversed it. It was introduced in California and it died, but it'll be back. And it is spread through Massachusetts. And it just dramatizes how bad ideas spread quickly.
Wow. I have never heard of that.
Yeah. Generational smoking bans, or NF nicotine-free generations, NFGs, nicotine-free.
Uh,
They go by those different names, and it's just an incredible threat, and it's spread. And right now, there's a serious proposal for such a proposal in England. Other parts of Europe will take it up, like probably Denmark and Norway would be two probabilities to take it up, and it's a true threat to the industry. I had this discussion with Carlos Fuentes Sr., Carlito's father, once, and he said, Glenn, we can survive taxes, we can survive regulation, we can't survive bans.
mm,
And that just kind of simplistically put it all in perspective instantaneously right there. That's what it's all about. So and those proposals will be under consideration going into the next year in Massachusetts. And I could see states picking up on it and introducing it, and it's like playing the constant game of whack-a-mole.
yeah.
So my day is a constant game of whack-a-mole.
I mean, this is really new to me about these generational bans or nicotine generation bans.
And the target
It
is
sounds outside of this world almost. Like, I can't believe we're talking like this in the United States.
well, and the target is, let's just be perfectly candid about it. The target is the vape and the cigarette market.
Right.
That's the target. But you throw in the word, when I first started in this stuff in 2006, it was all about smoking bans and the word smoke and the word tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
And in that period of time from 2006 to today, it's now evolved from smoke and tobacco just to the general word nicotine.
Right.
And they love these all-encompassing one-size-fits-all approach to regulation. And that's the impending threat of the day.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I know that PCA also has a close relationship with the Tobacconist University, I believe it is.
Oh yeah, my dear friend
Jorge.
Harris.
Yeah. So, there's basically, my staff right now are apprentices in the CRT, and I know Ron Melendi and Jorge are the only two New Jersey master tobacconists, certified master tobacconist in New Jersey. So it's always good. I always talk to them a little bit about their experience. But the one thing when my staff is actually looking at, we're reading things, going through the data or the information provided by the website there. Nicotine has always been not only in small amounts in vegetables we eat, but there's people talked about this when they read it to me. They're like, and I knew this, is the medicinal effects of nicotine. And, you have people that really, I know, like, I talked to one of the manufacturers of boutique companies as his kids were young. He goes, I will never allow them to have a cigarette, but if they ever want to have a cigar, I'll let them have a cigar. And he just, talked about just, he had, really a understanding of these medicinal effects. And it's just interesting how that word has been synonymous with, or just taboo now. Like, it's not the same. I mean, the chemicals in cigarettes, the natural product of cigars, they're just not in the same field to be regulated that way.
Oh, that's right. Well, the bottom line is, and we've made the public health case, and I think we've won the public health case, that we're different.
Yeah.
We're not to be associated, and we've got the statistics to prove it. We're not to be equated with the big three: inhalation, addiction, and mortality. And we've just made the case that that's the way it is. Even before we had the studies in our corner, I don't want to be too overly graphic, but I remember giving testimony in 2006 against the smoking ban in Virginia. And I would just say, would somebody produce one death certificate that says secondhand smoke?
Wow.
And It's amazing how quiet the room gets.
Yeah. I was at a loss just there. And yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I would like, to know, this is for my edification, but also for my, my place here in Summers Point, New Jersey. And I would, really want to rally, and I would like to learn more about like what we can do. What PCA, obviously, you have daunting tasks every year in front of you. You just mentioned 490 something bills coming at you soon. And it's just a repeating sort of cycle of just bans and regulation and bills, whatever you want to call it. So I guess,
Sorry.
oh,
Sorry.
that's all right. So I guess what I would like to know is, you know, what would be helpful for, let's talk about retailers in general. I'm not, familiar with all the manufacturers. I'm pretty much, I think they're doing their part if they can, but what would be helpful in your eyes for retailers to do to support, whether it's financial or, I know being a member of PCA, let's start there. How about everyone just be a member of the PCA? That's cool. But how can we go further than that? How can we sort of get involved in our own state? And I know you mentioned maybe there's a local association that we can sort of group with.
Absolutely. Well, one, yeah, you're absolutely correct. Every cigar shop in America needs to belong to the Premium Cigar Association, and you can go to premiumcigars.org and fill out your membership. And that not only gets you into the trade show, which is the proverbial benefit everybody talks about, but the host of benefits that have now been added to the benefits of membership has really grown exponentially just in the last 12 months. I mean, like I said, my local shop was one of the founding members, and they're 112 years old. But now we're getting into offering insurance products, and it's amazing how insurance has become a dominant subject. Shops being cut off from State Farm and others.
And you're talking health insurance?
I'm talking property and liability insurance.
Okay. So for the retail store, got it.
But also benefits like health insurance, also benefits like 401k, retirement benefit planning and packages.
Wow. So this is going way beyond. This is exactly
credit card processing services, where shops have been cut off from their provider for credit card processing, and we have recommendations for those that are accommodating to our industry for that. So credit card processing, insurance services, retirement, financial planning services, much less our advocacy support on legislation affecting your city and state, much less what we're doing at the federal level in Washington. So it's a handsome package now that says, if you're not getting your $400 and some worth of benefits from that package, I'm not sure
you're alive.
And it's not like you're joining the Chamber of Commerce. I mean,
yeah,
this is your livelihood. This is everyone's livelihood.
Yeah, this is something that definitely, I'm going to take with me and go forward with. I've developed a lot of relationships with a lot of shops now that I've been in Jersey for a while. And, one of the things that, we've been talking about is, group purchasing kind of ideas, just to have a bigger footprint, just like the restaurants would do and get the best steaks on the shelf. They could do it collectively. But one of the things I think is going to be important is just to push the in the forefront of these shops to make sure that we're sort of collectively being part of PCA.
That's right.
Not only for what you guys do on the advocacy level on our state, but even on the federal level. But now we're talking all these other benefits, which I wasn't aware of. So I'm glad to hear about that, because now that just perked my interest as well. My wife starting to retire. This is going to be my full-time thing. I got to think about all these other sort of expenses now, and now I have a resource at the PCA. So I'm
dramatize it. This entire discussion is not just about tobacco and smoke and cigars. It's about small.
Right.
It's about small business. Yeah. It's about how these small businesses are the backbone of their communities, and much less, the fact that your livelihood depends upon it. Would you mind if we took a quick pause?
Sure.
Quick pause. I'll
Yeah.
be right back.
Yep. Yeah, actually, that's probably the way we should start this right now. So yeah, getting involved locally is important. PCA membership, you have to, if you're in this industry as a retailer, no question, you should be a part of it. So tell me about the New Jersey Cigar Association a bit, and maybe how, and I'll put some links in here in our video, how we can get involved at our state level.
Well, we can talk about that while I take this band off so I can keep smoking this great cigar.
What are you smoking? How about that? Are you allowed to say?
Oh, I got to brag about this one. Hold on. My dear friend Sandy Cobas, who owns El Teton de Bronze in Little Havana in Miami, he's got a. If you're ever in Miami, you got to go visit. You got to go see her operation. She's got probably barely a dozen rollers there in Little Havana. That's
Wow.
the small factory that produces the Goldie for La Polina, and Willie Herrera with Drew Estate. The Herrera, that's her son-in-law.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of the Herrera cigars that Willie has got come out of her factory there as well. Well, it was announced last year she'd entered into a distribution agreement with General to do her first, like, her own nationally released cigar, and this is called Redemption. And Sandy's like the grandmother I wish I had. You go down there and you go across the street and you buy a couple of Cuban sandwiches, and you take them back in her office, and you see all these wonderful rollers, many, if not all of which, came out of Cuba into the United States, and she's busted down a wall and doubled her capacity.
Wow.
Her storage room for tobacco and aged cigars is just it's an experience. So because Sandy
Wow.
is like family, and like I don't mind bragging about her her cigar, and
That's great. That's
you
great.
can literally say "Made in America."
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm actually just met Neil Garcia from Jake Wyatt over the weekend. We were at the JCL, the Jersey Cigar Lounge kind of club this weekend at Cigars over at Franklin and Rio Grande. So I got a chance to meet him, and I'm having his Lucid, which is actually an interesting cigar. It's Candela wrapper on it. I usually don't do that, but it sounded and pretty good when I read about it. And it actually isn't just your traditional Candela. It's not as grassy as I thought it would be. So that's good. And yeah, that's what I'm having to Jake Wyatt right now. He's probably going to come into the shop at some point soon. But let's get back to now the New Jersey State Association that we can all sort of participate in addition to PCA.
Yeah, call our friend Gary Colsair at the tobacco shop of Edgewood. Gary plays ringleader for the New Jersey Association. He keeps his pulse on what's going on in Trenton. He'll be working on the tax cap bill that we hope will be introduced in January in the New Jersey legislature. Like I said, I've got a strategy call coming up on that very subject.
Good.
And
so I'll put that information up there as well.
Yeah, please do. And just bug Gary if you're a retailer listening to this. Make sure you call him and join. And also the important role that these state associations play for us and with us is you're the voice and the conduit to your congressional delegation, your delegation to Washington, D.C. Obviously, we need to make sure that your legislators in the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate know what federal actions mean to your small business. and they're more apt to listen to you than to me, the hired gun.
Mhm.
I can get the message out, but I don't vote in New Jersey.
Mhm.
You
Right.
do.
Right.
So having a delegation, a coalition of New Jersey small businesses like you are, come to Washington or go to their district offices in New Jersey to articulate how federal threats can impact your small business is an invaluable source of support for the overall mission of PCA. So, like I said, we've got state associations now in about 28 states. We've got a collection of states where you can pretty much bank that nothing's going to happen, not much is going to change. Then you've got those states that are always a threat or a looming threat. For example, a flavored tobacco ban will be back in New Jersey. Tax increases will be on the table sometime, someplace. You never know when local licensing legislation, which is an issue in New Jersey, by the way, on the licensing and permitting of new shops and lounges is a proverbial subject in New Jersey to keep an eye out on. The allowance of new cigar bars, like is legislation pending in the state of New York. And you mentioned New York before, and I imagine you got some patrons or listeners in New York. There's a tax cap bill that will be pending again in New York because they're at that atrocious 75%.
Yeah.
And there's also a pending cigar bar bill in New York. Not too far from you, the successful effort to get cigar bars permitted in Connecticut has now taken place and passed the legislature, signed by the governor, and they've issued their first new permit in 20 years in Connecticut. So there's all types of different approaches to the legislation that you can anticipate, that we stay in touch on, that we work with our state associations on. And we're getting ready to do and I'll have to get you the date, but we're getting ready to do our annual fall training effort for our retailers. And you'll be getting an email about this probably by the end of today or tomorrow. So I look again at my national map. Our first one is in a week, I believe, where we'll do a training session on anticipated legislation and the different tools to confront that legislation for the South.
Okay.
And that's everything from Texas to Maryland. The next week, we're doing all the northeastern states. So that's everything from Pennsylvania to Maine. Then the next couple of days later, we're going to do the Midwest. And then the first week in November, we're doing all the Western states. So we do this on an annual basis to train, to inform, to get everybody galvanized for the legislative sessions that are about to go into being in January, so that everybody's really on the same hymn sheet at the local, state, and federal level. We're losing an advocate for the industry. I don't want to debate or get into the politics of the situation, but New Jersey's losing Senator Menendez, obviously, as a United States Senator. We don't have to get into the personalities and personal pieces of that puzzle, but he was an advocate for the industry as a member of the United States Senate. So making sure your new United States Senator knows these things is going to be quite important. And helping to get the message across to Senator Booker, and then your members of the United States Congress, because there'll be a whole new political dynamic we're confronting in Washington, no matter who wins. No matter who wins. It's a new day in the neighborhood in Washington, D.C. come next, January. And the same holds true for our state capitals. So a whole new cast of players, and that just goes to the heart of our mission, and that is educating these elected officials as to what we are and what we mean to them as for small businesses scattered throughout America.
Right. Yeah, I know you got this conference call coming up, so I don't want to
We're all
leave.
good.
Okay. I want to make sure that we talk also about the next PCA conference. And obviously, I'll probably touch base. Maybe you could text me some of those links that you've pointed out today, so I get this right. Everything from how to sign up for PCA, how to, make sure you're part of the legislative sort of information website, get notifications. Our state association, that contact, I want to make sure I reach out to him and get some information on that. But we'll go offline and do that so I get it all right before I post this up. But let's talk now about your PCA conference. And I know it's in a different venue this year than last year. You were in Vegas, and now I think you're in Louisiana. Is it?
New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay.
One of
So
my
tell us
favorite
a little bit about the conference, especially for those who have not participated. What you guys sort of do, what's the goal? What do you want to walk away from that conference?
I'm going to switch gears now because it's on my desk. New Orleans.
You got
It's like I can go full NASCAR here. I'm switching. All right, there's New Orleans, and now this is the Cigar Factory in New Orleans. One of my favorite spots in America.
Wow.
I love Vegas. But New Orleans is one of my favorite cities in America.
Yeah.
It's like after Katrina and President Bush was asked, are you going to rebuild New Orleans? And he simply said, America needs a New Orleans.
Right.
And the Cigar Factory, and where else? There's not many places in America where you can go around the corner, buy some New Orleans rum, and walk it into the Cigar Factory. It's named the Cigar Factory. Pour your glass for a little libation and have a cigar rolled for you on site.
Wow.
And he puts it in your hand. And they've got a wonderful humidor there. And they've got about 6 rollers all the time. And it's a fabulous place to enjoy a New Orleans made cigar. Tobacco is shipped in from Nicaragua, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, but made with rollers there on site. Then you go around the corner to Cuban Creations.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful.
That's my spot.
Wonderful first-class cigar bar.
He's from New Jersey.
He's doing great things. The moral of the story is, one, the trade show is going to be in New Orleans. It's virtually sold out on the exhibitor side. If not already, I'm pretty close to it being sold out. There's going to be.
What's the date on that again?
April 11 to 14.
Okay.
We got to have a wonderful collection of seminars that Friday, education sessions. There's going to be great social opportunities. We're working with the city on different spots around the city to enjoy cigars. When push comes to shove, I think people will find that there's as many cigar-friendly places in New Orleans as there is in Vegas. And it's pretty much within a 15-minute walk of the host hotel, which is the Hilton, which is almost attached to the convention center. So it's going to be a marvelous opportunity, and it's going to be the show's going to be there for the next 2 years and then back to Vegas. So I like the way it's going to flip-flop basically and have 2 cities that are possibilities. And there's not many cities that are large enough or accommodating enough to take care of this industry. So we're lucky to have New Orleans and Vegas work with us.
So when you sit down with the executive board at PCA and your staff and you decide, about or you start working on the conference, what is it that you guys look for in terms of like your walk away? Like, what is your goal when you do these things in general? It could be anecdotal, just relationships, build relationships, or you can have very specific data that you look for to make sure you're doing it well.
Well, it's about getting a diverse collection of retailers from all over the country.
Right.
And there's only, it's one time a year, the only one and only time of the year that we can all come together.
Yeah, I was say the same thing. Yeah.
So much value in that. I mean, we're going to have a seminar, I believe, with Dave Garofalo, with 2 guys in New Hampshire on successful retail practices. And Dave Garofalo literally wrote a book about successful retailing. And being able to benefit from that, or you just bump into him on the show floor and you go, Dave, I want to bounce something off of you. And he's always more than willing to say, have you tried this?
Mm.
Have you tried that? Or you might see retailers in New Jersey that you've never ever met before, but you come
Right.
together in New Orleans to be able to share political war stories with California or Washington State, or to learn that you've got something in common, or you want to bounce something off a retail friend of yours in the Midwest. There's no other place to do that.
Yeah.
You're not just
Yeah.
going to be picking up the phone. You run into them on the show floor.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to have that type of an interchange with your brethren manufacturers, where else can you have a conversation with Carlito, with Rocky, with George Padron, with Pete Johnson, with some of the great personalities and manufacturers in this industry? And to have that opportunity, it's the reason that time just flies by, and all of a sudden it's day 3 and you're wondering, where did the time go?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I found when I went to the conference. I didn't make it out last year, but the year before I was there, and it was pretty nice to be able to see, actually to meet all these other retailers with their own sort of like issues in their state, but also what they do well and what's worked for them. And it's really been pretty nice to just, actually we would meet up after the show and just grab a drink and
Oh,
have cigars and
that's
all
three
night just talk.
that's 3/4 of it right there. I mean, where else
Yeah.
can you corner, Lito Gomez or Pete,
Hmm.
walk into the room or walk into the bar or where, coming away from dinner, and you're able just to, when else can you walk up to Lito and just say, what's that new
Yeah.
cigar you got coming on the market, and how can I get my hands on it?
Yeah. Right. It's
Or
true.
going to the boutique cigar pavilion. We were talking about the boutiques. There's the designated boutique cigar pavilion,
Hmm.
where all of these very, very small, wonderful companies are together. I mean, there's no way you could do that any other time or place where you can corner 15 companies in one quadrant of a trade show floor and have, a dozen conversations on something new and different on the market that's very, very limited because they're very, very small manufacturers.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
Or turn right around and be able to talk to you know Drew Estate, General, Altadas on the much larger side, and everything in between.
Yeah.
In the span of Friday to Monday, Tuesday afternoon, that's packing a whole lot of conversations and a whole
Yeah.
lot of experience and a whole lot of new cigars and a whole lot of trying cigars that may have been on the market for the last 10 years, but you've never tried yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the
Yeah. I
benefit,
remember seeing, you see, like you said, it's the full spectrum, man. You get your Padron and Fuentes, you all the way down to just their second year in the market, the second year launched. I mean, you see them all there, and the conversations I've had have been really nice to just see just their process of how they started. A lot of times, it's interesting. These manufacturers that are just starting off, I kind of like think it started out as a passion project. Like they didn't know where it was going to go. They just liked the industry. They liked cigar. They started getting into it, and they make this cigar, and all of a sudden, people start asking about it and wanting it, and then it becomes their business. And so
I'll
it's been
give you
interesting to hear.
I'll give you another great example. My dear friend Danny DeFabio in Key West. Now the industry went, really from Cuba to Key West to Tampa.
Mm.
The Fuentes originally came over Cuba to Key West,
Mm-hmm.
and then the industry migrated to Tampa from there. Danny and Rodriguez cigars are the only ones that are rolling on site in Key West.
Mm.
And my wife and I have been going down there for several years now. Made wonderful friends with Danny and his wife, and that sparked a conversation about participating in the trade show. And last year was his first year at the trade show, and he's been rolling cigars in Key West. You can go in there, and it's kind of like the cigar factory in New Orleans. You just walk up and
Mm.
have a cigar rolled and say, "Here." Um, and he did his very, very, very first show last year in Vegas. And I went up to him and I said, Danny, how did it go for you? I know it's tough getting some attention and in this malaise of
Yeah.
exhibitors. How did it go for you? And he had a simple answer. I have been blessed.
Wow.
I have been blessed.
Wow.
And that just sums up to me how
Mm.
a large company or a tiny company can get the same benefits from
Right.
all of us being together, all of us being together.
Wow. Well, I just want to, wrap up and just say, Glenn, thanks for doing this with me this afternoon. I'm really inspired by what you guys are doing on the federal and the state level. I want to make sure that I can be a local voice for the PCA. I'm really inspired by that. I think it's always going to be there. So it's going to, you have a job security, I would say. I don't think
Well,
we're not going to need it.
a dear friend of mine in Richmond, Virginia, that was a real mentor of mine in the early 80s and 90s, who was I'll just say a tobacco lobbyist. I won't say who he worked for, but he's a tobacco lobbyist. He says, Glenn, anything associated with tobacco is the Lobbyist Full Employment Act.
Mm.
And so that just resonated with me. There's always, it's like I said, every hour something changes. And
Right.
it's just amazing to me. What the difference is this, and I'll summarize like this. There's an old joke in Richmond where Philip Morris is located. There's a large law firm there that used to be called Hunton and Williams. And the old joke in Richmond was at any hour of the day or night, someone at Hunton and Williams is billing Philip Morris.
Mm.
And the point was the lights are never off. You
Yeah.
can never turn off. And I've taken that to heart in the cigar industry, in that now, over a dozen years later, our political machine, our legal machine, our defense of this industry machine is never off. We've got full-time staff in Washington. We've got advocacy efforts going on around the country. We've got partnerships with our brethren associations. The machine is never off. And that's been an evolution that's really come about since about 2009. And that's a very, very short period of time for an industry that's this size to really get its political and legal act together. But it's together as it never has been before. And so I want to encourage everybody to listen to this. Go to cigaraction.org, stay on top of the legislation in your state, work with retailers like yourself to help get our message out and to be engaged with your local, state, and federal legislators. And if we all do that together, this industry will have a bright future.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining me. And, we'll have to do a recap and see how things are going after the conference. Maybe we'll see each other at that time and have a cigar and a libation and talk about what's going on at the state level, federal level. And I just appreciate what you're doing and all the guys and girls at PCA that are working on our behalf to make sure that we're being treated fairly and that we have sustainability in our own industry. So I appreciate that.
Anytime, and you won't have to ask twice in New Orleans.
All right, brother. Thanks again, Glenn. Have a great rest of your day. And we'll have all this information out for you in we'll probably put it out there with the links and things to get involved. And just again, thank you, Glenn, for being with me. And I'll see you guys all next time on Beyond Smoke.